Tux Theater. We're here today with Deb Nicholson. So, Deb Nicholson is a free software policy expert and a passionate community advocate. She is the general manager at the Open Source Initiative, which stewards the open source definition and works to raise awareness and adoption of open source software. She is also a founding organizer of the Seattle New Linux Conference, an annual event dedicated to surfacing new voices and welcoming new people to the free software community. She lives with her husband and her lucky black cat in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So, Deb will be taking questions at the end if there is time. If you have a question you'd like to ask Deb, please type it into the Tux Theater text chat with the word question in the front in all caps so we can find it. Thank you, Deb. Take it away.
All right. I gotta say, I appreciate the seagulls in the background as soon as you announced the seagull event that I'm involved with. Um, I don't know how you work that. It must be magic. But I'm really happy to be here. Be here in virtual, of course. And today we're going to talk about moving slow and trying not to break each other. So I work at the Open Source Initiative. This is me, and there's the organization, and you can uh, get at me on Twitter with those two handles right there. And the reason that I decided to give this talk is I guess it became even more obvious during the pandemic that the current state of things is pretty speedy and perhaps like not particularly sustainable in a lot of ways. And that's like kind of the default. That's not necessarily, I'm not calling out any specific projects or specific people. It just seemed to be that our default was like be busy, be shipping stuff that might be broken or untested or undocumented, and that's like how we go. We're like seat of the pants. And so I started thinking more about sustainability, which is an idea that a lot of people have been talking about in free and open source software over the last couple years. There's like a whole group dedicated to discussing open source sustainability. But when I listen in on those conversations or read notes or participate, I feel like the participants in those conversations are not necessarily using the same definition of the word sustainable or the concept of sustainability. So I looked up what sustainability says when you look it up in the dictionary, and this is the UK dictionary. And you can say the top definition there is the sustainability of economic growth. So it's really focused on, um, you know, like making sure that money keeps coming in, which, we live in a capitalist society. People got to eat and they have to exchange money usually for food in order to get it. So, so this is like, I understand why there's a lot of attention to continuing to sustain economic growth. But it gets a little weird when you think of it as like, oh, that's the only thing worth doing is maintaining that kind of sustainability. And then I went and looked up sustainable on the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And that one has a slightly different take on the idea of sustainability, which is relating to or being a method of harvesting or using a resource so that the resource is not depleted or permanently damaged. Merriam-Webster is probably not thinking about open source contributors here, but I certainly am when I read this. I certainly support thinking about sustainability for the planet we live on, but that's a little outside of the scope today. So I started thinking about like, what if we were more explicit when we spoke about sustainable practices and sustainability and really focused on making projects sustainable, not necessarily economically sustainable, although there's probably some overlap there, but looking at what's actually scarce in free and open source software. And for me, I think it's people who are excited to work on free and open source software. They want to build something beautiful. They want to build something and share it with the whole world. And the enthusiasm to do that, to give something back to the world, is what I think of as what is actually scarce. So when I think about sustainability in open source, And maybe you'll start to think about it this way too, because I've now said the word sustainability like 18 times. Maybe think about the resource that is the most precious, which is people who are excited to work on projects that they want to share with the world and make the world a little bit better. So in doing that, so when you think about like sustainability in an environmental way, you usually are like, whoa, slow down. Let's not just like fill up the dumpster with a bunch of, plastic disposable one-time use stuff, or let's not just take the whole forest without a plan for replenishing and those types of things. So like in a developer sense and a contributor sense, it's more like how do we not use up people's energy so that they leave? How do we make sure that the projects and places that people are contributing their energies are places that they want to do that for a long time and not just for like 2 years, get bought and make furniture and never do software again. So I thought about slowness and I thought, you know what? Snails. Snails are good at slowness. Why are they good at slowness? It's a good question. Um, it turns out that the slime is part of why they're good at slowness. And the slime, while also pretty, like has all these actual functions. And it turns out that a lot of those functions are ones that are also good for open source projects. So this is from the Wikipedia entry on snails. The foot of the gastropod is covered with a thin layer of this mucus, which is used for a variety of functions, including adherence, lubrication, repulsing predators, and recognizing other snails, plus following a trail to a known destination. So, in our case, if not a known destination, at least one that has some known variables where we know that it's going to be open source. We know it's going to be a welcoming community that people want to participate in. And we know that we're going to be building software that empowers people and maybe improves the world a little bit. So, the first one, adherence. For us, I think the key piece is adherence to our goals. So, it's one thing to start out as open source and then whoop, stuff happened 10 years later and now you're closed source and you, kind of pissed off all your contributors by a giant license change. So adherence to goals, I think, is really, really important. It's part of trust. It's part of what makes it, um, a thing that you want to continue to participate in. So if everyone adheres to the goals, then you have like a good coherence about what you're doing and a lot of good investment and buy-in, emotional investment and buy-in on the project. And the way that you accomplish that is by sharing your mission and your goals often. It's basically like the opposite of Fight Club, where you basically never stop talking about your mission and your goals. So, the more people who understand what you're doing, the better. Nobody should encounter your project without knowing the answer to what's the point of this? Or why are you bothering with this? Or why is this so important? And so you basically want to make sure that you're working back to your goals all the time and reminding people who are there that you're always optimizing for these goals. So you sort of like set a path and describe where you're going to go. And that helps you bring in more people that want to help you get there. So when you're talking to someone you're just meeting and you don't know where their interests might intersect with yours, and you don't know what else they know, but you can at least tell them about what your project is and where it's going. And maybe, that's not in person right now. So maybe on your website, you would have on the front page, like what the point of your project is, as opposed to, how it works or both, hopefully. So, that's how you end up attracting folks who want to help you with your goal, not people who are like, "Oh, I want to participate in a Python project, but I don't want to have it be open source." Those aren't folks that are going to help you get where you're going. Those are folks that are going to end up kind of being sand in the works for you. And so like one of the things that's interesting is that if you're talking about the goal rather than the mechanics all the time, when are encountering new folks and new people, you might end up with people who want to help you with your goal in a way that you hadn't thought of. So, for instance, this happened with us at Media Goblin. Media Goblin is decentralized media hosting. It takes a whole bunch of different media types and allows you to interact with them in one place that's user focused. But it also is very dedicated to privacy and control over the way that you share. So there's a lot of granularity on the sharing. What's neat is that we had thought, oh, this is for hackers and it's for artists, or it's for artists who are hackers, or hackers who are artists. But someone contacted us about using it for an elementary school, which isn't something we had thought of. It turned out the folks that started the project didn't have kids in elementary school, so it wasn't a use case that we had, been planning for. But because our goal was to build something that was like privacy first and really granular sharing, like it meant that it was a perfect pick for an elementary school that wants to share pictures, but not with the whole world, just with the other kids in the class. And also to be able to answer to parents who have like real concerns about privacy for lots of different reasons, and being able to strip out EXIF data that talks about the location where the pictures were taken. So these were folks who shared our goal of wanting to have a tool that where privacy is first and granular sharing is central. But they didn't know anything about like hackers, and they didn't get any of our funny ASCII art jokes. But they ended up like implementing it at a small elementary school. So it was kind of neat. And so as you go through the world, you might end up finding more and more people that like your goal, even if you hadn't thought of who they might be first. So, and that's exciting because the more people that pitch in, the more you can spread out the work, the more reach you can have, even if your core project is pretty small. And that's teamwork makes the dream work, right? So we're going to go back to snails. Lubrication. That is the second function of snail slime. And I think for us, we're probably really talking about social lubrication. And I just mean like having, if people are doing a project that that you're working hard to build relationships with people, so that, I used to do a talk about like, how do you try and get new contributors? And someone asked me from the audience, like, so when someone leaves your project, why is that? And I said, well, what did they want? Did you ask them? And they said, no. And of course, I can't answer why someone left a project that I'd only just heard of. But if you have people participating, especially as volunteers, but also if they're participating as direct reports, you should know why they're there and why they're excited to work on what they're working on. Because then if what they're doing starts to deviate from what they told you they wanted to be there for, then you can kind of step in and be like, how can we get this realigned? Otherwise they will leave, and then you will be wondering why they left. Or you can ask me and I won't know, but then I'll have a funny story for another talk. So when you're building relationships, you're going both up and down your stack and looking for folks that can help you, um, do what you're doing by like understanding like, where does your software go after you're done? Where do the pieces that come into your project come in? And you're trying to build relationships with, up and down in both directions, and with your users too. So you want to be collaborating early and often. It's, like if you have events or forums or online meetups and things, then you invite the people that you work with on the project to participate or to watch or to be part of the event. And when they have events and things and they talk about like what's on their road, and you pay attention to like the things that they're publishing so that you can kind of understand, it means less surprises, and everyone likes less surprises. um, and this means like you sort of get to know each other, which is great. You want to have a relationship with the people that affect your work, even if they're not like right in your direct line of sight, because one day there will be the no good, very, very bad day. And if something happens that affects not just your project, but like some of your dependencies or some of the places that your software goes after you're done with it, you're going to want to know who to contact immediately. And you're going to want to have some trust when you do that. And so something like Heartbleed, which I'm sure for this audience I don't have to go into, but it was a bug, a vulnerability in the SSL, which had several different implementations and several different distributions in different places. And, the community had to talk to each other and say, like, okay, let's tell everyone that there is a bug so that they can at least try to isolate the effect. And then we're going to patch it here. And then it's going to have to be like kind of tweaked and patched in different ways in different places. And that chain of letting everyone know across the community, the relationships that exist between different free software communities were really key for making sure that those patches got to all of the places and all of the users and all of the people that it needed to get to. So this, if building relationships sounds a little too like, I don't know, fluffy and nice, then maybe think of it strategically. But I will tell you that these two-way relationships do take time, and they do have to be two-way. Like you can't just always be asking for favors and expect folks to continue to want to do that. The other thing is that a lot of folks, like, you have to include your introverts, because extroverts like myself most of the time will happily, like, yeah, what's up, like, sure, we can be friends, like, follow me on whatever. And but the introverts sometimes are sitting there with a lot of really key information as well, so make sure that you're kind of always leaving the door open there too. All right. And, just, I mean, I'm sure that you're probably already doing some of this, like you're here at an online social event about free software. So you probably already are making connections with some folks, but this is more to think about, like the social lubrication of doing it a little bit more intentionally and inclusively, and making sure that you're kind of like leaving all your doors open. All right. So another function of snail slime is that it helps you recognize other snails. And this is really important because if you are going to be, building this amazing, slow, like lots of nice connections, free software project, then you're going to have to find some like-minded folks that are going to help you build this. And some of the ways that you can do this and signal to people that you respect their time and you respect them, not going for broke and not, and continuing to like sleep a regular amount of hours each night, is by taking care of these lovely like-minded folks when you encounter them. One way to do that is by building redundancies into your projects. And, so some overlap and some redundancy, so that there are always at least two people that can do anything important. So you're never calling somebody up during their brother's wedding to like reset a server or something terrible like that. Um, you want to have two people who can access any account, two people who know where any key piece of information or documentation is. Um, and so, this means that like when life happens, and it will, um, that you can be like, "Hey, no problem. Go ahead. Sarah's got it." This is part of how you care for people in a slow project that allows people to like, you know, go do things like help their sister move, or help their roommate with something, or take a sick day when they ought to, types of things like that. So like those things are going to happen. There's nothing that we can do about it. Um, and nor should we. It'd be really weird if we had that power. But life happens, and if you're able to be gracious when people are going to be unavailable, then that's going to go a long way towards them feeling like, oh, I feel valued and not, like a cog in a wheel here. Another thing is like sometimes people leave the project and they don't come back, and that's okay. But you want them to like go out into the world and sort of broadcast like that you were great and it was nice. So you don't want to be weird when people leave. Um, it's just not it's not good. Like, people are gonna do it. They're gonna go to grad school, they're gonna have a baby, they're gonna have to, like, take on more caretaking duties or something like that. But if you send them out into the world like, "Oh, that was really nice. There was, like, a really good exit strategy as well as, like, a nice onboarding strategy," and then they recommend your project to other folks, even, like, maybe 10 years later, like, when they haven't been involved for a long time. And this happened. I used to work at this nonprofit years ago, and we had interns. They had to come and do an internship for school. Like, they didn't have to choose us, is the key thing here, but they had to choose something. And so we had this young woman, and she came into the office, and she had a really, really great time. And so for the next 5 trimesters, we had somebody that she knew from her school also doing the internship, and they were all pretty great. So she kept like recommending interning with us like way after she left. So, it's the reputation that you send outside of your project is really important. So sort of like this beacon of Gondor, it keeps jumping and jumping and jumping. Nice. If you're looking for like a really friendly PHP community, like check these folks out. So another way that you can take good care of your people once they show up, your other snails, is to set good long-term goals. So people know like kind of what is coming down the pike and and kind of understand like not just like, oh, our mission is to make a really nice education portal, but like they understand what each and every of the steps are and what the time frame is likely to be, so that everybody is like kind of on the same page. It helps everyone feel like they're part of the process and that they understand what's going on and that you trust them with your plan. So, the one thing that's really, because like what happens is you have big goals and then sometimes little goals, and then you got to make sure that the little goals don't um, become like myriad, like that your big goal like doesn't descend into like a whole bunch of like side quests. Um, because then you're not respecting your goal and you're not respecting all the people that you communicated your goal to. So like make sure that you kind of keep that tight. Once you say like here's where we're headed, then actually stay headed there. Um, and it can be hard because sometimes there are like these shiny objects and you're like, what is that? I could do that. And it would only take a weekend. Like, I mean, you can do that for yourself if you wish, but try not to like drag the whole project with you on the side quests unless they're willing and you have a conversation about it. The other thing I would say is don't be afraid to do less. Like this is another way of caring for people. So like, um, if you're like, oh, our goal is to get here, and maybe you're going to do like 50 new features by the end of the year and it's December and you have 20. Um, don't be afraid to go ahead and go back to your community and say, it's going to be 20. That's it. Or maybe we'll finish the 5 or that are 75% of the way done, but we're not going to do 50. And like, we obviously that didn't work. And so I think it's okay to say like, hey, we have to pull this back, or something like step 7 turned out to be like 50 tiny steps. And you have to say like, well, that's not going to happen by December, but it may happen by next July. And that's okay. So don't be afraid to do less and be explicit about it. Say, don't just like quietly like, like you have to say like, hey, things took longer than we thought. Like we had to deal with a global pandemic, for instance. Um, or something turned out to like have like 10 more layers of complexity than we were expecting, and so we're going to do less. And this is the same with unreasonable deadlines. So if you had like, we're gonna like write a million lines of code by the end of the year and there's still just 4 of you, like you're not going to make that deadline. Don't do that. Because then everyone is just tired and it's not good. Like making everyone feel sleepy and sad because they weren't able to get the things done that you were hoping they would get done is not a way to honor people and their willingness to contribute to your open source project. So our fourth and final lesson from the snail is repulsing predators. And so I spoke about this a little bit at the top, that our default culture in tech is not slow. It's fast. It runs roughshod over legislation, local laws, uh, labor, lots of different things. People's, the apparent, the how the human beings are supposed to sleep some certain number of hours per day. Um, all these kinds of things, like our default culture in tech doesn't really like to take on board. And that means that you end up with things where it's like, let's just crush it over the weekend, or um, let's just pound it out overnight and not sleep, or sleep under our desk, or never leave the office, or something like this. And that like for a long time that's been portrayed as sort of heroic. Um, and it is like if you stay up all night to do something that really, really needs to get done, okay. But like the thing you should be asking yourself in the morning is, how do we not do that ever again? And it's difficult. Like, so even if you think about like, hey, so repulsing predators means like you might have a project that where your culture, you have decided with your founders and your friends and your co-contributors that you want the pace to be slow. And then someone shows up from another part of the tech community and they want things to be fast. Like they like your tool, but they don't like your culture. And so you're going to have to be vigilant about repulsing or maybe retraining predators. So, and it might sneak in small at first. Like, people might think they're like helping to like kind of build team spirit by suggesting that you stay all night to finish something, or that, let's just double our output for the next 2 weeks or something like that. And you're going to have to like resist this because it sounds cool to get more stuff done. But in the long run, you're going to end up with a lot of people that don't like to sleep. And I can tell you right now that that is not where you want to be. Slower is kinder. Slower means that you have time to say, oh, let me show you how I'm doing it since you asked a question. Or, oh, let me take a minute to teach you how to do this bit yourself so that you don't have to wait on me to fix this part of the database for you to get your work done. Slower allows you to say things like, oh, well, I totally understand if you have to take Friday off. Like, we'll get back to it next week. Um, and then slower, it makes it easier for you to be nicer and take a minute. And for the other end, you're not like constantly expecting like the barrage, the emergency, like everything is on fire in your inbox all the time. And that means that people can relax a little bit. They don't have to be like constant alert, like we're moving so fast, like anything could break and it could spin off in my direction any second. And so, um, if you don't want people constantly on edge and worried when the wrath of whoever expected something to get done like at 4 a.m. yesterday didn't get done, you have to be willing to be slower. So not everyone is ready to choose slow, and that's okay. But if you really want slow at your project, then you have to be willing to stick to your principles on that. So when you choose slow, you have time for documentation. You have time to take a minute and do some strategic planning so that you can look at what your 2, 3, or 4-year goals are for your project. When you choose slow, you give people time to be their best selves. Like if people are, instead of responding to questions like, oh, I don't have time to answer that, or like, why didn't you just read the instructions? Or there's an FAQ already, get out of my face. Like, you don't, you give time you give people time to be their best selves, and they can say like, oh yeah, that is kind of a weird question, let me take a look. um, and so you really want to do that. And it makes people feel a little comfortable, like they can kind of relax a little bit, and they know that it's okay to ask questions, and they can settle in, and instead of being kind of like always looking over the shoulder for a better project that is nicer and more comfortable to be a part of. It also means that you give yourself time to be your best self, especially if you're a leader within the project. The way that projects work is they take their culture and their cues from the top. So if leadership says like, oh yeah, it's okay for you guys to like be slow and not work on the weekend or stay up all night or whatever, but me and the other founder are gonna do that. The two of us are gonna stay up all night and just fix this. So, it sends a very clear message that like, if you want to be part of the top, you want to be part of the leadership, you want to be part of the like in group, that you stay up all night. Um, so really try hard to resist the temptation of being nice to everyone else except for yourself. So, um, give yourself time to be your own best self. And then you'll have time to be picky about your clients and partners and collaborators, like whoever it is that you interact with. Um, you might be able to specialize on some, really specific use case that is really exciting and unique and fascinating to you. So you might choose to focus on a particular academic use case or something that is, just like really cool, instead of just going super speedy and trying to provide like a barely working product for as many people as possible. Um, you might have time to do some of the community things that you want to do, like the mentorship programs that make the future of tech look hopeful and amazing. uh, Folks can talk to kids about like tech careers and like, at Code Week and things like that. You might decide as a company or as a project to participate in a donation campaign or a food drive or something, because you're like, well, we're doing pretty good here in tech. Maybe we could give back to the wider community. Those are the kinds of things that make your community and your workplace and your project special. Like saying like, "Oh yeah, we did that together." Um, in addition to like shipping some code, which is also important, but having a little bit of leeway, like to be extraordinary, makes it really special, and that means that people are going to want to stick around. So you have the option to build something amazing or treat people like human beings. That's usually what we're told is the option in like today's capitalist workplace situation. Like we can either be really nice to you, or we can make all the money. But I think we could do both, right? There's no reason that we shouldn't at least try, right? Um, you know, each of us is building the communities that we participate in every single day, whether it's at work or it's in our volunteer work or some hybrid, because we're doing free and open source software, and sometimes that's the case. Um, but we're in control of how we do that. We're in control of the kinds of behaviors that we want to reward and the kinds of behaviors that we want to discourage. And we can choose slow. We can choose to be kind. We can choose sustainability, where, those folks that we talked about, the precious resource of people that want to build software that makes the world a better place and share it with everyone, that, that person is getting some sleep and is feeling valued and is feeling like they may have found a place that they can really contribute. So, um, let's do both. That's what I have for you today. I do have some picture credits, and then I would be happy to take some questions.
Hello. Thank you so much for that talk, Deb. That was absolutely lovely. I really enjoyed it. And I'm sure everybody else did too. So we do have time for questions. We have quite a bit of time for questions. We have about 10 minutes here. So if you have questions, please type them into the chat in Vanulus in the Text Theater. Preface them with question. Here is our first questions. Any comments about, in quotes, Elon time?
Um, I actually try really hard not to read very much about Elon, but my guess is that as a famous kind of enfant terrible, I do not probably enjoy his thoughts or theories on time and how much you should work. Um, yeah, it's that comes from that used to be Steve Jobs' time or whatever before that, where, you just sort of bully people into working as much as they can, that type of thing. Yeah, I mean, it seems like, when you look at a person like Elon Musk, you might think it seems like his secret sauce is that he yells at everyone and gets a lot of work done out of them. But I think his real secret sauce is that he has a lot of money and he's a white cis man that's really good and at being confident and getting more money from investors. So, is the secret sauce a lot of investment or is it a lot of yelling? My guess would be it's probably more investment than yelling.
That's a very good point, Deb. Um, do we have any other questions? Just give people a few seconds to come up with something.
Cool. Yeah, and it's ironically, I did speak a little fast on a talk about slowness.
That's it's always the way. Here we go. Can you remind us about Open Hatch and where to go now for that wisdom?
Ah, thank you so much. I'm glad you remember Open Hatch. Open Hatch for folks that it was a little while ago, but it was a nonprofit project that was aimed at helping newcomers to free and open source software find where to go. So we built a couple of tools on and like rubrics on the wiki as far as like how to do your first patch and how to like get missions like so that you could learn Git. And then also did a whole bunch of like day and a half workshops with first timers. And they were for women and their friends. So the goal was to kind of um, increase the diversity in projects by having workshops that were at least half women or people who didn't identify as men. So where can you go for that now? First timers is like where you can find some of the tools and the tips on finding good first patch, like bite-sized bugs and that kind of thing. Um, and then as far as like workshops, I know that there have been it kind of rolls around a little bit. People do like um day and a half workshops. The Python community is still really, really good. And that was the first place that we worked on with Open Hatch. And I keep hearing that there are other folks looking into other places where they might start doing Open Hatch workshops again in conjunction with a university. Our workshops are split. Some were on a university campus, and then some were just kind of um, in conjunction with a local user group. I don't know of anyone who's doing them specifically in conjunction with their local user groups, but I do know there's interest in starting to do them again in conjunction with universities.
That's great. I'm a big fan of workshops.
Yeah.
We have another question. What project or projects come to mind that do well at the tactics you're describing?
I mentioned Media Goblin a lot, which we actually gave over. It was a GNU project. It still is a GNU project, and Ben Sturmfels is the current maintainer on that project, and he's a lovely fellow. And so you could still work on Media Goblin. Chris Weber, who is the person who was like sort of the tech lead founder at Media Goblin, is now working on something called Sprightly. When Media Goblin is one of the things where I described, it turned out like, oh, we have like a list of 10 things. And then it was like secretly hidden in thing number 7 was like actually 50 things. And so Sprightly is related to some of those 50 things that we discovered in step 7, which was like modular decentralization. Um, the Sprightly project is going to be a little different than Media Goblin in that I think it is going to be more focused on folks being able to build their own environment almost from scratch. Not scratch the program, but like from sort of first principles, like what kind of environment do you want to create? And I think it is going to, from the beginning, include a little bit more of an educational bent for younger computer users. As far as other projects that I think probably do a good job of slow, um, I think Python, like a lot of the Python community is really committed to doing good onboarding um, and treating people well. You'd probably have to get a little further in to find out which pockets are like the slowest.
That would be fun. Investigate projects and go, how slow are you? That would
Yeah,
be a lot of
yeah.
fun.
I would love it if people just started asking that, like, "Hey, I was thinking of I did one bug, it was cool, but like, how slow are you?"
That's great. We have another question. Have you had to send this message up to manager slash corporate execs ladder with waterfall sales targets, such as
Mm.
quarterlies and so on? We need to sell however many per widget. Do you have any tips?
I wish I did. I've stayed pretty far away from corporate stuff. I've been pretty much my entire career has been in nonprofit. And so I haven't done too much of that. I do think that probably the best place to start, like if you're getting from however many levels up, like this unrealistic list of things, is to make sure you make friends with your manager, like professional friends, and make sure that when they receive the 100 things that the team will do, that they feel like I'm going to push back. We cannot do 100 things. We can do 70 well or 100 crummy. You can pick, but don't come back and bother me if like you picked 100 crummy. Um, and so I think you really need a manager who's kind of an advocate, like at that first level, who understands your team's capacity and and is a good communicator as far as like this is what I can get done without a bazillion mistakes because people are sleeping and going home. So you just have to, I think you have to be really clear. It's a little bit it's kind of a manage up thing. And I have done that in smaller places, but usually if you put the question back like so I'm only be able to do 3 of these 5 things. Which ones what do you want me to prioritize? And then make them pick.
That's the dream, isn't it? To be able to get that message going up. There's another related question to that, which I guess is a bit of a different angle. How can one actually transition to going slowly if you're currently working in a team where you have to work 110% of the time? Is it even possible to transition from a work environment like that to a slower and more healthy one?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it can be hard when it's already in place that everyone goes fast. But you can I think you can say like, hey, so last quarter I did a lot of stuff. I want you to know that I was really, really tired, and that's an unsustainable pace for me. And and I recognize that like not everyone has like it depends on what the relationship with your workplace is, if you feel like you could in a few months find something else fairly easily or not, like how hard you want to push back. But I think it's okay to be honest, at least with your direct manager, and say, that pace was unsustainable. I did it because I thought it was like sort of an emergency crunch time, but I can't do that all the time or I'm going to have to find another place to work. Yeah,
Thank you
I
for
wish there
that.
was a secret word that you could say that was a magic spell like, Slowifricus or whatever, but unfortunately it's all hard
I think
conversations.
we all want that, don't we?
Yes.
Um, Well, we've got about a minute left, and we don't have any questions right now, so I think we'll call it there. Everyone, if you've got more questions, Deb might be able to step over into the Tux Theater post-talk Q&A chat channel for a little bit. So if you haven't found that in Venue Listlet, look in the sidebar on the left and go to the Browse for More channels. Just remembering that Deb's on the other side of the world from the conference time zone, and it's starting to get a bit late, I'm sure, for her. We're now going into lunchtime. That's great.
So, how do I find that link?
We'll give you instructions, Deb.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're going into conference lunchtime, so we'll be back at 1:30 Melbourne time, I think. I can't see that right now. I think that's right. Yes, 1:30 Melbourne time. Thank you again so much, Deb, for a wonderful talk.
Thank you for hosting. I felt very comfortable and taken care of here. Thank you.
Thanks.